After putting about 22 hours in completing Doom: The Dark Ages, I can't help but leave the game feeling slightly disappointed. This game is the third of the newer Doom games, with Doom 2016 as well as Doom Eternal being two of my favorite FPS games over the past decade. Now, that's not to say this game is bad, by any means. It's definitely not. I think some people are genuinely going to think this is easily the best game in the Doom franchise as a whole. However, for me, some of the core changes to the philosophy of these games kind of left me feeling disappointed. This game is definitely slower paced than a game like Eternal and, in my opinion, even 2016, focusing more on parries and only one ability being able to really move you around the map, which is your shield charge. It focuses a lot more on melee combat because of that, and it removes glory kills to speed up the game a bit, because if there were glory kills, this would be by far the slowest paced Doom game. They also added 2 mech sections into the game, one being a giant Pacific Rim-like kaiju fighter, which the first time is awesome, but it definitely breaks up some of the more fun parts of the game, in my opinion, because there's not really much to these mech sections. Same with the flying dragon mech. It's really fun right away in the first time you hop on the dragon, but after that, it gets a little bit boring because, again, there's not too much to these sections. The music is also not Mick Gordon, so it just doesn't have the same soul that the previous Doom music had. And lastly, there's a big focus on story, and there are some really cool cinematics here, but that's not necessarily why, personally, I'm playing a Doom game. I don't really care as much about that. I want to stay in the fast-paced action as much as possible. But what this game does do well is still make you feel like one of the most badass protagonists in the history of gaming. And that's because the most important part of the Doom game, which is, in my opinion, the combat, is still extremely good, albeit a little bit slower paced. You are still gonna have so many of those moments in the game where you're gliding around with the super shotgun, popping off on a huge ass demon, destroying him and blowing chunks of flesh all around the map and killing them in one hit, switching to a cycler, hitting 20 different enemies, getting their shock charges, hitting them with the flail right in the head and blowing them all up at once, throwing your shield and cooking 30 enemies with shields in the back line. You're gonna have those moments where it's just so fun, it's visceral, it's brutal, it's gory, and it's so Doom. Now, in regards to the combat changes they made, you are going to have a shield like I mentioned here, and this shield is going to have a shield charge and a shield throw, and give you the option to parry. So it's pretty much the thing you're gonna be kind of centering the entire combat around. So anytime you see a big green arrow coming at you in any part of the map, that is something that can be parried and stun the enemy to get free hits in. Now, on top of that, if you have an enemy with shields, both plasma and normal shields, you can upgrade your shield to be able to slice through those things. It can also slice into a boss-like or a bigger demon and then kind of stun them for a certain amount of time as well, which is especially good if you have a lot of small enemies around you, or you have a couple big enemies all attacking you at the same time. You also have these runes for your shield that if you get a perfect parry, you will do some sort of special effect, whether it's summoning a machine gun, or my favorite, putting out a giant shockwave onto the ground to just destroy all the enemies in front of you. That was my favorite. I loved it. I really like the shield. It's one of the best additions to this game. I'm a Souls player and I like parries. So not being able to have to dodge everything, but just running right through enemies feels extremely good, and it is very satisfying. If only they still had those glory kills to finish some of those shield charges, in my opinion, it would feel even better, even if it slowed the game down. I don't care. That is a staple to these new Doom games, and I wish they were still here. Now, they do have melee kills, and melee weapons are relatively brutal when you hit an enemy with them. And again, they're going to pop chunks of flesh off some of these demons. They are going to have some pseudo glory kills with the shield and with the melee weapon as well. a little bit faster, a little bit less impactful, and I don't really think taking out glory kills made this game any better in any way. Yes, it did keep the pace up a little bit, but I'd rather feel like a badass through and through than have a little bit faster pace of gameplay. But with these melee weapons, you will have a couple different options here, with my favorite being the flail, but you're also going to have something like just your straight up hand where you're punching the hell out of enemies, and it is cool. The flail, though, was definitely my favorite. I loved running around with the shield and the flail, and they pretty much work relatively the same way, but they're going to have different upgrade trees where you could upgrade that flail to do some really cool things like scorch every enemy around the enemy that you hit with your flail. And I really loved that type of gameplay, just crushing an entire wave of enemies with one melee hit. It was very cool. However, I will say, something I really don't like about the melee combat is it gives you ammo for some of your weapons. So you don't really have to use hardly any weapons in the game other than maybe one or two that you really like. And I really like the combat of cycling through your different weapons and using them all a lot more like in the previous games. You don't really feel like you have to do that at all in Doom: The Dark Ages. It's especially a bummer because there are like 13 really cool ranged weapons in this game. I didn't use the rocket or grenade launcher much, or I didn't use the pulverizer, which would clear waves of enemies very much, because again, my flail and my melee weapon just did that better. Then it gave me ammo for my super shotgun or my cycler, which were my two favorite guns that I just used kind of throughout the entire game. I wish I had more reasons to upgrade and use other guns, but the game never gave me that, and they never had me really ever run out of ammo with my main gun, so I never even had to use them in a moment of desperation. Now that is the ground combat specifically, and I think this game absolutely peaks when you are in the heat of that ground combat, and it's some of the best feelings you will have in a Doom game, point blank, period. Until you get to the mechs. Now, the first time you hop into the mechs, both the dragon and the kaiju killer, which is what I'm going to call it for the rest of this review, it feels so good. You feel every big impact of every single hit with both of these mechs. Flying around in the dragon specifically was so cool, it was responsive, and I loved it. But both of them work pretty much the same way, and you really don't have many attacks with either of them. So after the first 2 to 3 minutes of being in them, after that you don't really do anything differently. With the kaiju killer mech, you start off, you have 2 attacks, R2 and R1. R2, you build up big R1 charges, and then you dodge. And if you get a perfect dodge, you build up more of your R2 charge or your R1 charge. That's it. The dragon, kind of the exact same thing. You attack with one gun the whole time, and if you dodge perfectly, that gun overpowers and you attack a little bit stronger. There it is. That's the entire mech combat, and you have multiple sections of each of those, which just feel like an unnecessary delay to get back to the ground combat, which is really fun and has a lot of depth to it. Now, moving on from the combat specifically, I want to talk about the level design and the importance of exploring these levels, because there are a lot of different things in these levels that you can do that I really like finding secrets, finding toys, finding codexes, for example, or upgrade materials in gold for your weapons, for your melee weapon, for your shield and runes, etc. There's also challenges that they will give you an actual reason to use a different gun for a fight or two to complete that challenge and get more upgrade materials or more gold. And within the linear level design, this works really well. They have a lot of shortcuts where you grab a key, then this shortcut will put you back to the start of the map where you can open a door you couldn't the first time when you went through that area, etc. And it's really good, and I love it. It doesn't really break up the going to objective and just clearing enemies, and you're fighting like 80% of the time in those levels, and it feels really good. However, there are also open world levels where I genuinely think I was just running around 75% of the time, and only like 25% of the time I was actually fighting enemies. Especially because on one side of the map, you might find a key that you have to run to the whole other side of the map to potentially open a door. You're just backtracking, I think, half or more than half of the time in these open world levels, and it does not feel good After I'm done working, making dinner, going to the gym, hanging out with my girlfriend, doing any chores that I need to do around the house, maybe going grocery shopping, I come home, it's 11 o'clock at night, and all I want to do is sit down and play a couple hours of games, the last thing I want to be doing is backtracking instead of killing demons in Doom, personally. But I think, in my opinion, the level design in overall was a little bit disappointing, because I think the linear levels probably only make up less than half of the total levels when you add mech levels that I think get boring later on into the game, as well as those open world levels in there. Some are really good, some are a little bit monotonous to get through. Now, moving on to the last part that I wanted to talk about here, that is the difficulty. Now, the difficulty, at least the hardest version, the nightmare version in this game, is so much easier than the previous Doom games, specifically in Doom Eternal. It is way easier. I only die maybe once or twice per map if I die at all. It's just pretty damn easy. Now, I think this is because they added something new here, and that is the sliders, where you can customize each individual part of the game yourself. Now, I think a lot of people really like this, but my personal opinion, I don't necessarily love this. I think it lends to making the hardest version of the game a little bit easier, and it kind of makes me feel a little bit incomplete when I beat the game on the hardest difficulty, but there are so many things I can technically make harder. These sliders, though, they do offer a lot of different changes. You can customize enemy aggression, their health, how much damage they do, how much damage they take. You can do hardcore modes. You can do hardcore modes that if you have life sigils, you can respawn, but if you don't, then you have to restart your whole run. Things like that are cool. Not necessarily my taste, but I think a lot of people will like that. My personal opinion, though, is I don't generally like these type of sliders in games because I think it leads to the hardest difficulty just feeling a lot easier than what you can actually make the game. So all in all, I think the reason I don't like this as much as the previous Doom games is simply just because personal taste. Like I mentioned at the start of my review, I think some people will like this game a lot more than the earlier Doom games. If you like those mech sections, if you like the more melee-focused combat, kind of like me, if you like just running through enemies and kind of a slower-paced combat from the previous games, you're going to like this one a lot, and this is probably going to be your favorite one. I think even me personally in general, in terms of what this game looks like, where it has all of the medieval architecture mixed with the Doom guns and all of that, I think is awesome. I love the whole scenery and the art direction they did with the Dark Ages, so I think for those reasons, people are going to like this one a lot more. There are some things that I just think are straight up worse. For example, the music. It's not Mick Gordon. It's a lot more basic, soulless rock than Mick Gordon's, which is, I think, the pinnacle of gaming soundtracks. I think the level design is just straight up worse as well with how much backtracking you have. But just because I think there are things that are worse and some things that I objectively just didn't like as much as the previous games, does that mean I didn't like this game? Absolutely not. I still loved this game. I think it's a great game. I think it is still a good addition into the Doom franchise, 100%. But instead of the 8 I would probably give 2016 Doom, or the 9 I would give Doom Eternal, I'm probably going to give this one a 7. I didn't like it as much as those games. But I don't think it's a bad game. A 7 is still a very good score, and I still enjoyed it for what it was. I don't think there is enough content a lot of times in these Doom games, though, to make them $70. I think this could have been a $50 or $60 release, but I understand that it was $70 because it's obviously a AAA experience. Now, one more thing I do want to say, and I was going to put this at the start of my review, but this got fixed and I haven't had any problems since. At least I fixed it on my end. PC performance. I put out a whole video talking about how bad PC optimization has been in 2025 with some of the biggest games of the year like Monster Hunter Wilds, Oblivion Remastered, and this game, Doom the Dark Ages, where I crashed so often that I couldn't even get past the first level for multiple days. I had this game in early access. I paid over $100 for this game, and I still couldn't play it, despite downloading the recommended drivers they told me to download to make this game run well. I was able to fix this relatively quickly, but this is still absolutely unacceptable in 2025. Do better. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I would love to hear down below in the comments. Did you play this game? Do you like it more, which I think a lot of people will, than Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal? Or do you like it a little bit less? I would definitely love to hear what you guys have to say. If you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe if you did like what you see here. And for my returning viewers, as always, thank you guys so much for the support. Please like this video if you liked the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace!